Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, I interviewed someone who writes about politics, religion, money, and conspiracy theories. He is the author of 4 nonfiction books, which range from less controversial works like 5 Steps, Your Guide to Financial Health, to works about controversial conspiracy theories like Awoken, Conspiracy, or Theory. His name is Donald Galade, and here's my interview with Donald. Donald Galade, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, I am a financial advisor, and then I also kind of dabble in writing. I've written a few books. A couple of them have become bestsellers, and I've also done some amateur filmmaking and music production.
One of your books is 5 Steps, Your Guide to Financial Health. I'm starting with your least controversial book. Without spoiling too much of that book, what is it about?
All right, well, 5 Steps is really a very short and simple, listen, I need a financial advisor. What should I have? What should I look for? What should I be afraid of? What qualifications do they need to have? It's kind of like, your financial advisor should fit this resume. And the other things are, what is a mutual fund? What is an annuity? And I'm not saying all of these things are good or bad. I'm just showing what they are by definition and teaching people that this is what products are and this is how they work.
Now it's time for us to get a little more controversial. Another of your books is In God We Trust, The Dollar We Worship. Without spoiling too much of that book, what is it about?
Well, it's real simple as well. I found out one day as I was studying the Bible that God talks about money more than he talks about anything else. And being as I'm in an industry that talks about money more than anything else, I thought, this is worth exploring. And I started to find that, it's really not controversial at all. It's just saying what the Bible says about money. So if you believe that, then fine. If you don't, then that's fine too. But it's pretty interesting is the most common thing we hear is money is the root of all evil, right? You've heard that 1,000 times, but it's actually not true because the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. Money is simply a tool, just like a hammer or a saw. It's a tool that is used and is needed. And if it's used correctly, you build something really nice. If it's used incorrectly, what you build isn't going to last.
Now we're going to get into your most controversial book. And remember, by controversial, I'm not necessarily putting a negative spin on it.
Right.
Because the professional wrestling promoter Eric Bischoff likes to say controversy creates cash. But
that is true.
But another of your books is Awoken, Conspiracy, or Theory. Without spoiling too much of that.
Now we're into the meat of this. This is where people are either going to love it or hate it. It's really, really simple.
Without spoiling too much of Awoken, what is your book? What is that book about?
Well, it started off as a spoof on the word woke, because unlike maybe you and some of your listeners, I'm an older dude. I've had a couple of rotations around the sun here, so this whole woke agenda is not something my generation had as kids. So what's frustrating is the media, the movies, the entertainment industry in general, and even the church and our government are all turning to this quote unquote woke agenda. And we really need to wake up, because what I show in this book is, number one, how did we get here? And I'm going back starting in 1900. And that's how I'm laying the foundation of some of the presidents that we've had, some of the so-called industrial leaders that we've had, and some of the people that created the financial institutions that we have currently, such as the Federal Reserve. And anybody who knows anything about the Federal Reserve can automatically know where that's going. And I walk you through where we were, where we are, and in my opinion, where we're going if we don't wake up.
Amazon lists a book titled Job Loss Survival Guide Controlling Your Future as having been written by you. Did you write that book? Wait.
Yeah, that's really just a self-help little thing that I wrote that I hand out to clients. It's on my website that, I think it's for 99 cents. It's not something that I ever planned on making money off of. It, like, if I have a client in my office and they're saying, hey, I'm going to lose my job. Well, here, you should read this. This is, what you should and shouldn't do with your 401k. So it's really more of a large pamphlet than a book. So I don't really include that in the repertoire, because it's really marketing for my industry and my business.
I'm going to go back to Awoken for just a little, just for the next question here. How is Awoken a book that conspiracy theory believers and those who don't believe in conspiracy theories alike can enjoy reading?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's the meat of the whole thing. See, as I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty fond of studying the Bible. And when I say study, I like doing word studies. I like to take, this word is written in Greek, and this word in Greek means this, and in Hebrew it meant this, and etc. And not to give you a Bible study lesson, it gives you the origin of where it started and who wrote it. Okay. So when I was studying the book of Revelation, which it's a tough book to comprehend, but when you're studying it and you're dissecting it, it talks about a one world religion. It talks about a one world government, and it talks about a one world leader, which is called the Antichrist. Now, when you look at what's going on, even not necessarily in our country, but globally, you have CDBC and FedNow and BRICS creating their acronyms for what is going to be ultimately a one world currency. You have the International Monetary Fund, the WHO, you have the UN, and folks like Mr. Schwab, who runs the World Health Organization and the IMF, basically. But you have these global entities pushing an agenda. And that agenda would definitely be a one world type government. So I find it ironic that, people talk about the Antichrist, if they're not a believer, as a conspiracy theory. And people would talk about the one world government and all of the other things that we just talked about right there as conspiracies. So I'm showing you, well, it's unveiling in our lifetime, in real time. And when you look at some of these global entities and you look at what the book of Revelation says, and you pair them together, well, you could choose what you want to believe, but I'm giving you enough data to say, it's probably a good idea to keep your powder dry. And if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, now would be a great time to figure out who he is.
Are all your books self-published, traditionally published, or published via hybrid press, or did you use different methods for each one?
They're all published through Amazon. Initially, I tried my first book for In God We Trust. I tried using an actual publisher, and not to talk ill about that particular publisher, but it cost me a ton of money and it was a nightmare. Amazon makes things so simple. Is it the most lucrative to the author? Probably not, but it's the simplest. You write it, you upload it, and you pick your parameters. Amazon does the heavy lifting. If you wanted to buy it, you push the button, you pay them, and Amazon prints it and sends it to you and sends me a commission. So it's literally that simple. If some major publisher came along and said they wanted to give me a deal, I'd love to talk to them about that. But for right now, I still have a business to run, so I can't spend time on the semantics, pardon the pun, of how to actually create a better publishing tool.
What drives you to write and talk about politics, religion, money, and conspiracy theories, which are not exactly topics that you would expect to want to talk about at Thanksgiving dinner?
and that's the phrase I use literally in the marketing of the books. Well, just some background. Okay, I'm Italian. Okay, and for our Paisan viewers that may be listening, you know what it's like growing up in an Italian family, and you know what it's like with people getting into discussions that are kind of loud, even when it's just a conversation. And I've always had a close relationship with Christ, so I've always had church was always very, very important in our family. Well, I also I grew up in the generation that was enamored by the Kennedy assassination, and my first time I've heard the word conspiracy theory. So growing up, I've probably looked into every conspiracy theory that there ever was, or ever is, just because it was exciting, it was crazy, it was fun. Well, when I started to see this thread that ties all of what I'm about together, I was like, wow, this is nuts. And I found, well, that's literally why you're not supposed to talk about it at Thanksgiving dinner, because none of these things should go together, but it's actually the opposite. All of these things do go together. You just have to see what the common denominator is. And ironically, the common denominator is money.
I'm going to ask the last question I have written down as kind of a couple different questions.
Okay.
Prior to your work for Kingdom Financial Ministries, what was your prior experience in the financial sector?
Well, I started off in the 80s working for Metropolitan Life Insurance, 1986, I believe. And, I was a musician, so you set your own hours in the insurance business. So I thought, yeah, I can milk this for a little while. Well, here I am. So I guess I'm still milking it, so to speak, right? I really didn't expect it to be a career, but it did. It merged into going from just selling life insurance into actually acquiring all the different licenses to sell stocks, bonds, mutual funds, do estate planning, and not to get into elements where I'd have to give disclosures and all that kind of stuff. People can go to the website and read that if they want. But I've been in the financial services industry since that time. So Kingdom Financial Ministries is like one of the two financial service companies that I have. There's GFS Financial Advisors, which is your everyday, I want to buy a mutual fund, I want to buy, to roll over my 401k. For people that care about where their money is with respect to, am I investing in something that is funding Planned Parenthood? Am I investing in something that is potentially funding things that would go against what I believe morally, ethically, or part of, things that would go against my faith. Kingdom Financial Ministries is an entity that shows people you can invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange traded funds that do not support things that are contrary to what the Bible would suggest.
You actually answered the next question I was going to ask with your response to my previous question. So, Donald, you were an intriguing guest, and I thank you wholeheartedly for appearing on Apollo Papyrus.
I appreciate the opportunity. And if people want to get any of my books, they can find them all from the same link, which is www.a-woken.com. It would have just been awoken.com, but that domain was taken. So it's a-woken.com. And from there, it goes to the Amazon links, and they can check things out. And if they have questions, I think there's an email address on there. They can ask questions. And I appreciate the opportunity to chat, and I'd love the opportunity to come back in the future.
Although I disagree with a lot of Donald's political views, he was an interesting guest to interview, and I enjoyed interviewing him. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.